Would you like to learn how I got from here to here within relatively a short period of time? Then stay tuned and I will tell you tips and tricks that helped me significantly improve my art skills. And before we begin, there are two important notes that I would like to tell you. First of all, I'm self-taught, so I didn't go to art school or arts college or anything similar. Everything I know I learned by myself, by reading, watching videos on YouTube, and also taking part in some online courses. Some of them are pretty good. Second, and most importantly, I would like to tell that I actually do not paint that often. I mean, I do not paint every day or even every week. To be honest, sometimes I really paint only once a month, simply because I really do not have the time to sit and focus and relax and really immerse myself in the painting process. So when I do, I want to make sure that I use this time to the maximum. So these tips and techniques that I stumbled upon and came up with, some of them myself, they really help me to improve each time I paint something, or at least almost each time. My tip number one is to get a bad sketchbook. Yes, you heard me right, get a bad sketchbook. We are all looking for this perfect sketchbook these days, so that it looks nice and feels nice and it has 100% cotton paper. However, it's not actually always a good idea, from my point of view at least, to get such a sketchbook. And I think it is crucial to have a bad sketchbook as well. And let's explain me why. When we get a good sketchbook, we want all our paintings and sketches to look nice in it. So we try really hard, and then at least I might become a little bit intimidated, and then I become less brave, less daring when I try new techniques or trying to paint something new. And as a result, I can just continue painting what I'm used to painting, and that didn't help me improve at all. So what I started doing is that I found a bad sketchbook, which doesn't mean that it's really bad. I think it's pretty good, especially for the money, but it is a sketchbook that I do not really care about. And so I feel completely free playing in the sketchbook. Sometimes I just play with colors, or I just make some really small sketches that I do not care about at all. And I also sometimes make some thumbnail images before I move to the real painting, just to see how the colors are coming along. And then if I like what I'm seeing and I feel relaxed and confident enough, then I move to the real painting. And I do think that this helps me a lot to relax and to get into the groove, so to say, so that when I am to start painting the real thing, I just can continue and stay as relaxed, because I already try out all the techniques in my bad sketchbooks, or just some scrap paper, to be honest. I do that as well. So I do not feel intimidated, and I feel quite confident when I start painting. My tip number two is leave your comfort zone. Sometimes I find it really scary to try painting something new, because I really want it to look nice, so I'm trying really hard, and then I'm sketching or painting this new subject, and it just turns out so very bad. And before, when it happened, I used to just drop the idea altogether, and I didn't paint anything new for quite a long time. I was stuck at painting landscapes for a long time, though I do sincerely enjoy painting them. Do not understand me wrong. But another reason why I was doing it is because I found it easy, so I felt comfortable painting them. But I did really also want to try painting something new, but I didn't feel daring enough. Till I told myself, it's okay to make a bad painting. I cannot create masterpieces every time. I don't think anyone can create masterpieces every time, and it's not needed, because the final painting is only part of the joy, and I think for many artists it's not even the most important part of painting. But the process of painting, this is what really brings the joy, to feel the brush in your hands, to play with colors. So I told myself that it was totally fine if my first, second, 20th, or maybe even 100th sketch didn't turn out the way I saw it in my head, because who cares? I had a good time, and time well spent is never wasted, right? That's at least what I was telling to myself. And this mindset allowed me to continue and to try over and over and over again without getting frustrated. And of course, after some time, I noticed that, for example, making portraits is not that intimidating anymore, because even though there are still many aspects of the portrait that I need to work on, I'm in the very beginning of my portrait painting journey. But at least I don't feel terrified when I'm thinking, oh, it would be so nice to paint a portrait in this special idea that I have in my head. So now I know that I'll just paint and paint and paint, and at some point it will turn out just the way I like it. My tip number 3 is closely related to my tip number 2, and that is finish your painting. I used to abandon my paintings very often in the middle or even in the beginning of the process, because it looked like they weren't turning out the way I wanted them to. So I just scratched, well, I didn't scratch, but I threw away the paper and tore it apart, and then I wanted to start all over again, and I didn't want to continue. And that didn't really help me improve at all. What did help me though was finishing my paintings, and that was for several reasons. First of all, when you do finish your painting, then you can step aside and analyze as a whole the mistakes that were made, and trying to figure out, okay, what can I do better next time? Second, especially in watercolors, if the painting doesn't look like it's turning out the way you wanted it to turn out, it actually doesn't mean that it's going to turn out bad in the end, because watercolor is difficult to predict, and sometimes it just comes with some unbelievable effects and results on the paper that you didn't even know were possible. And if you continue and if you embrace whatever your paint is doing on the paper, then yes, you might get something very different in the end, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to be beautiful. And the last but not the least, many paintings have ugly stages. I mean, let's face it. And you do not know if it's just a stage or if it's really truly ugly unless you actually finish the painting. Because sometimes we just need to push through and put on more layers, add more details, or maybe new objects and subjects on the paper, and then voila, you have a great painting. My next tip is to embrace the layers. I do not know why, but when I started painting, I wanted it to be done on the first layer, maximum on the second layer with some details. I really do not know where it came from, but somehow it felt that this was my goal. And I realized that this is not the case. For me, what really did the trick to embrace the layers is to see them as a save button. Let me explain. Imagine you're doing a digital painting and it seems to be turning out quite nice, and then you press the save button so that if anything you could revert back and delete the changes that you made. Of course, you cannot really do it in watercolors, but if you're working on the painting and so far it looks quite nice, it might mean that maybe it's a good idea to stop right now, let it dry, so to say, to save the layer, and then to continue working on the details further on. And I also do not limit myself anymore about how many layers I'm supposed to use or what would be a good idea. Of course, there are different situations, it depends a lot on the paper and different people have different opinions, but I just let myself to have as many layers as I see fit. Sometimes it's nice to have some light 1-2 layers, other times I had cases when I had like 5-6 layers because I really wanted to build up the value or to do the glazing and all that stuff. So embracing the layers really helped me to bring the paintings to the next levels, and give them the finished look that I couldn't give them before. Another trick that helped me improve is giving myself time for art. What I mean by that is not necessarily that I constantly try to allocate time for art, because that is really not happening for me. Sometimes I'm just too busy. But what I do mean is that before, whenever I had this time, I tried to finish the whole painting within this block of time that I had right away. So I was rushing and, I didn't give myself the freedom to really work on it. While right now I tell myself, it doesn't have to be done today. I'm not a professional artist for whom painting is a full-time job. So I tell myself, okay, I'll do as much as I can today, then I will save my layer, so to say, save my painting, and then I'll continue later on. And as a result, some of the paintings that do take several days and more, but this is okay, because sometimes it's really not enough to have half an hour or maybe even an hour to make a good painting. And yes, some people are capable of doing it and I admire them. I think it's just unbelievable and incredible, but I'm not one of those people. I know that for me to make something what I could be proud of, it usually takes me several days to work on it. And you know what? It's part of the process and I really enjoy it. And this really helped me to think more about the painting, to think more about the process, rather than rushing myself just in order to finish the painting, just so that it is done. So I really tried to focus on the process rather than on the final result. My other tip is related to using colors. We often hear about how great it is to use a limited palette, because then all colors work well together and it looks nice and it's easier to learn the colors and the mixes, and I do think that it is completely true. But specifically for my type of paintings, or at least for the paintings that I like, it's not necessarily the case. Because I was watching some of the painters and they just mix all the colors they can get in their painting. They just follow their intuition and what looks good, and then they just use the colors that they need. So I believe that sometimes it can be a good idea to just forget about the limited palette and just use all the colors that you might see fit. And then maybe there is mud, maybe it's not gonna work together, but it's a great experience. And this is really based on my personal experience, because for example, let's say before, when I was painting the sky, I would pick a blue and I would paint the sky. Maybe I would mix a blue with a little bit of, brown to neutralize it, and I'll paint the sky. But now I'm trying to experiment, and let's say when I paint the sky, I can use both ultramarine and then a little bit of phthalo blue, and then I'll see maybe there should be some indanthrone blue or Payne's gray, and I see how they flow and work together, creating this complicated something. So there are several tones of blue that I'm using in the sky, and I'm not saying that it works every time. Sometimes it doesn't work out at all, but when it does, it can actually lead to some very beautiful results. So I could highly recommend just to play around with it and see how this would work out for you, because okay, maybe 5 times you'll make mud, but then on the 6 times you will find the color combination that really works for your painting, and that might end up looking wonderful. So why not to give it a go? What else has really helped me to improve my watercolor art skills is actually reading books. Art is very visual, right? So you might think that the best way to learn is to read videos or to go and take part in different kinds of online and live courses and so on. And yes, that's great, but I also think that reading books is actually exceptionally helpful. I believe maybe this is because when those painters and artists, they try to explain their techniques and their approach, when they need to put it on paper in words, then they really need to think about how can they explain it in the best possible way. So sometimes when you're watching a video, you might not entirely grasp it, what they're trying to say, while when you're reading, it might be easier, or at least it is easier sometimes for me. And I'm not saying that each and every book is great, but if you would like to learn the books that I really like and that helped me a lot, then let me know in the comments down below, and I'll make sure to make a video about it. And my other tip is remember the values. I do not know why, but I couldn't grasp it for such a long time. Everybody was saying values, 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 values. And the way I was translating it into my paintings is that something in the background I will make a little bit fuzzy and maybe in the cooler tones, and something on the foreground I'll make a little bit more detailed and maybe in some warmer tones. And that was it. And I thought that this is the way it was supposed to work, till I actually understood that sometimes you really need to be brave with your darks. Or at least this was the case for me, because I have a tendency sometimes to keep things too light, so I do not go dark enough where it needs to be dark. So try to take a look at your paintings. If they do look a little bit flat to you, then think, is there anything that's too dark? Or maybe there's something that's too light? So for me, usually I do not have enough of the dark spots. So that's why I also use many layers to really build up the values, because when I have those darks in place, the light areas of the paintings, they look better, and then it just seems to work out. So if you do feel that, okay, everything is supposed to be right and correct and done by the book, but it's still not quite captivating, then values might be what is missing from your painting, at least in my personal opinion. And these were all my tips for today. I really hope that some of them might help you too, or would inspire you to try something new, because of course not every technique works in the same way for everybody. I think it's important to take a look at your paintings and try to figure out what is missing or what could be improved. But at least in my experience, this tips is what really helped me to improve my skills, or at least to feel more confident when I paint different subjects and not being terrified when there is something new that I would like to try and paint. So thank you so much for watching this video and staying till the end. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you have some special tips and tricks that really helped you improve your art skills, then please make sure and let me know in the comments down below. I would love to read them and I would love to learn something new. But thank you for now, and see you in my next video. Bye!